Welcome to Book by Book. We are diving deep into a really revolutionary idea today, one that fundamentally shifts how we view the economic world. We're unpacking Nobel laureate Richard H. Thaler's landmark work, Misbehaving, the Making of Behavioral Economics, which came out in 2015. And, this isn't just a book about finance. It's a really detailed, often quite funny account of this academic battle that was waged over decades, arguing basically that the people populating our markets, our societies, well, they're not the rational automatons you find in traditional economic theory. Thaler essentially wrote the memoir of an intellectual revolution, didn't he?
He really did, yeah. He chronicles his own struggle and often facing, pretty stiff, sometimes even hostile academic resistance, all to prove that human psychology, our quirks, our biases, those predictable mistakes we all make, it isn't just noise you can ignore, it's actually the signal, the thing that must be baked into economic models.
Right. It's a really compelling look at how he kind of forced the field to evolve, moving it from that, let's say, ivory tower world of perfect rationality into the messy human reality we actually live in.
And that tension, that's the absolute foundation of the entire book. You see, traditional economics built its whole, elegant structure on the assumption of the econ. This theoretical being who's perfectly informed, has infinite brain power, always maximizes utility perfectly.
And never procrastinates.
Exactly. Complete self-control. The econ, as Thaler puts it, is basically a calculating machine. No emotions, no putting things off, no regrets.
But then you just look around, right? You look at, I don't know, your neighbor who buys a flashy new car on impulse, but somehow never gets around to starting that emergency fund. Or investors who, panic sell during a market dip, absolutely guaranteeing a loss. If the world is run by these econs, why is it so full of, well, predictable financial screw-ups?
That is the huge chasm Thaler really exposed. There's this persistent, you just can't deny it, gap between that clean, elegant theory and the messy, chaotic reality of how humans actually choose things. So our mission in this summary is really to trace Thaler's journey. We'll use his core concepts to show how he and his collaborators built behavioral economics into a serious field, one that actually changes policy.
Yeah.
And understanding these predictable human quirks is just vital for anyone in management, policy design, or even just for you, trying to navigate a world that often feels like it was designed for econs, but is definitely populated by humans.
Okay, let's really unpack that foundational conflict then. The whole thesis hinges on swapping out that theoretical econ for the real-world human. And like you said, this isn't just semantics. It's the difference between a model that looks neat on a blackboard and one that actually works when you're, say, in a grocery store deciding what to buy.
Precisely.
The humans, we forget stuff, we put things off, we get emotional, we don't have perfect self-control. It's just how we are.
And crucially, as you touched on, our mistakes aren't random. That is the most important finding that even allowed behavioral economics to get off the ground. If human error was just random static, traditional economists could just wave it away, right? Argue that in a big enough market, all those little mistakes would just cancel each other out.
Yeah, washed out in the average.
Exactly. But Thaler showed, no, our biases are systematic. They consistently push us in one particular direction, the direction of, well, predictable irrationality.
That really hits home with Thaler's iconic statement, the one you can almost imagine echoing down university hallways. We do not live in a world of econs. We live in a world of humans. It means that when people say overpay for something, or they don't save enough, or they stay stuck in a job they hate, those actions aren't just random blips on a chart.
No.
They're the result of these built-in psychological processes.
And to make this really concrete, we can look at one of the first systematic biases Thaler studied in depth. It really reveals the kind of internal machinery of human misbehavior, the endowment effect. It's a perfect illustration of how our psychology just flat out violates the basic assumption of rational value.
Okay, tell us a bit more about the mechanism behind that endowment effect, because it sounds like it's more than just, thinking your old coffee mug is special.
Oh, it is. It's deeply rooted in the work Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky did, specifically their concept of loss aversion. Loss aversion basically states that the psychological pain we feel from losing something is roughly twice as strong as the pleasure we feel from gaining the exact same thing.
Huh. So losing $100 hurts about twice as much as finding $100 makes me feel good.
Precisely. Now apply that to things you own. The endowment effect means that as soon as you possess an item, the mere thought of giving it up triggers that feeling of loss. Thaler famously showed this with a really simple experiment, often using students and university-branded coffee mugs.
Right, the mug experiment.
Yeah. He'd give half the students a mug, they were now endowed with it, and then ask them, okay, what's the minimum price you'd sell this for? Then he asked the other half, the ones who didn't get a mug, what's the maximum price you'd be willing to pay to buy one?
And I'm guessing the prices didn't exactly match up.
Not even close. A rational, econ-driven price should be pretty much the same for everyone, right? Reflecting the mug's sort of objective market value. But consistently, the sellers, the ones who owned the mug, demanded a price that was easily 2, sometimes even 3 times higher than what the buyers were willing to offer.
Oh,
That attachment, that feeling of, hey, this is mine, and giving it up would be a loss, it just instantly inflated its perceived value in their minds.
that's fascinating. And it really forces anyone in management or policy making or heck, even just someone selling their house to confront the fact that value is subjective. It's not purely objective. You can't just assume people make rational valuations. If you're a manager trying to roll out some change at work or a policymaker swapping one employee benefit for another, you absolutely have to expect that people will overvalue what they currently have.
Yeah.
And they'll probably fight like mad against anything that feels like taking something away, even if the new thing you're offering is objectively better.
It's exactly why change management is so incredibly difficult. You're literally fighting against the biological reality of loss aversion. So if the rational model sees us as like a chess master moving pieces optimally,
Right.
then human behavior is more like being caught in these sort of gravity wells. We get pulled by emotions, fear of loss, procrastination, attachment, and it yanks us off that optimal path.
But the pull isn't random.
No, that gravity, that pull is predictable. That's the key.
Okay, this is where it gets really, really interesting for me. If we accept we're not these unified calculating econs, then how on earth does our brain actually manage complex stuff like saving money or budgeting or planning for the future? If we're not operating on some single, perfectly interchangeable financial spreadsheet in our heads, what internal rules are we actually using?
Well, this brings us right into one of Thaler's earliest and I think most influential concepts, mental accounting. This is our lesson 2, really. It reveals how people instinctively categorize money differently. Depends on where it came from or what we intend to use it for or just which mental pot we've assigned it to. We treat funds as non-fungible, meaning not interchangeable, even though objectively a dollar is a dollar.
Oh, I think everyone listening gets this immediately. You know, money you inherit just feels different than money you earned working on some really tough project.
Exactly.
Or money you've mentally labeled retirement savings feels totally untouchable, right? Even if you're maybe struggling to pay a surprise medical bill using money from your regular checking account.
Precisely. And Thaler gives these brilliant examples of how this mental accounting leads to some seriously irrational outcomes. Think about the classic case he uses, theater tickets. Imagine you paid, say, $50 for a ticket to a show. You get to the theater, reach into your pocket and realize, oh no, you lost the ticket.
Got him.
Yeah. Now, most people, having already mentally spent that $50 from their entertainment budget, are incredibly reluctant to fork out another $50 for a replacement ticket. It feels like the show now costs $100, which seems excessive.
Okay.
Now, imagine a slightly different scenario. You arrive at the theater, ticket in hand, but you realize you lost a $50 bill somewhere on the way.
Also annoying.
Right. But you still have the ticket. In this case, most people, even though they are financially in the exact same position down $50, are actually far more likely to just go ahead and enjoy the show.
Why? There's still $50 poorer either way.
Because of mental accounting. In the first scenario, the $50 loss came out of the entertainment budget mental account, pushing it way over budget in their minds. In the second scenario, losing the $50 cash. That came out of the more general wallet cash or miscellaneous loss account. The entertainment budget itself feels intact.
Wow. Okay, that's huge. It means the frame, how you mentally categorize the money, completely dictates the decision. It overrides that fundamental rational idea that money is interchangeable. This must have massive implications for business incentives, right? Like, if a company offers a big discount, maybe I see that as savings, and it goes into my practical long-term mental bucket.
Yeah.
But if they offer the same value as, say, a free gift, like a physical item, maybe I treat that as a windfall that I can just enjoy right now, guilt-free.
That is precisely the application. Managers, marketers, they need to understand how consumers mentally bucket windfalls versus savings, or necessities versus, frivolous treats. If you want people to use a reward responsibly, maybe save it or invest it, you have to frame it that way.
Right.
And conversely, for us as individuals, we really need to actively audit our own mental buckets sometimes. Check if they make sense. Like, if you realize you're holding onto cash in a savings account earning almost no interest because it's mentally earmarked for some vague future emergency,
Hmm.
while at the same time you're carrying high-interest credit card debt, well, your mental accounting is actually costing you real money.
Yeah, the rational move is clear. Pay off the high-interest debt first, but that mental bucket stops you.
Exactly. The mental bucket acts as a barrier.
And this leads us straight into the second really big internal conflict that Thaler identified. If we have all these separate mental buckets, how do we stop our present self, the one living in the moment, from constantly raiding the buckets that are meant for our future self?
Oh, yes.
Which brings us nicely to lesson 3, the planner-doer conflict.
This model is just essential for understanding things like willpower, procrastination, self-control, all that good stuff. Thaler suggests that our identity is kind of split. There's the long-term, rational, strategic self. He calls this the planner. And then there's the short-term, impulsive, instant gratification-seeking self. That's the doer. And basically, we're in this constant internal civil war between the two.
Right. The planner is the one who meticulously researches the best retirement fund, sets up the automatic payment, buys all the healthy groceries on Sunday with good intentions.
Exactly. And the doer. The doer is the one who cancels the gym membership after only 2 weeks, dips into the savings account for some impulse buy online, and orders pizza because cooking just feels like way too much effort right now.
In there.
We all have. And the failure point of almost every rational financial plan or diet or personal development goal is that it assumes the planner is always in charge. But in reality, in the heat of the present moment, it's almost always the doer running the show.
That's such a powerful analogy Thaler uses, isn't it? The planner designs the perfect road trip map,
Mm-hmm.
but the doer is the one actually driving the car, constantly getting distracted by billboards for ice cream stands or scenic overlooks that weren't on the plan.
Exactly. So the big question Thaler tackles is, how do we manage this fundamental human failing, this lack of perfect self-control? You can't just tell the doer to be rational. We know that doesn't work.
No, willpower alone seems doomed.
Absolutely not. Thaler recognized the key isn't trying to build superhuman willpower. It's about building better commitment devices and smarter choice architecture. We need to find ways for the present planner to effectively tie the hands of the future doer.
Okay, how do we do that?
Well, the most famous practical solution that came directly out of this planner-doer conflict is the Save More Tomorrow program, or SMART, which Thaler developed with Shlomo Benertzi. And the premise is just genius in its simplicity because it cleverly aligns the planner's good intentions with the doer's natural tendencies, things like inertia and loss aversion.
Right, walk us through the mechanics of SMART. Why did it work so much better than those traditional sign up now to save more campaigns?
Okay, so traditional savings drives often fail because the doer feels the pain of a smaller paycheck immediately. That loss hits hard right now.
Yeah, ouch.
SMART gets around this beautifully. Employees commit now when the planner is feeling virtuous to increase their retirement contribution later. And crucially, it's specifically timed to coincide with their next pay raise.
Okay, so the commitment is in the future.
Exactly. And this has 3 critical psychological advantages. First, the current doer feels zero immediate pain, no loss right now. Second, when the raise comes, the increased saving deduction is kind of masked by the overall pay increase. The employee's take-home pay never actually drops below its current level. It just feels like a slightly smaller raise, not an actual loss.
Clever. Leveraging loss aversion again.
Precisely. And third, once that increase is implemented, the default setting takes over, inertia kicks in, the doer is usually just too lazy or forgets to actively go in and opt out later.
That's just a brilliant application of behavioral insights, isn't it? It uses our human weaknesses, procrastination, inertia, hating losses. It actually uses them to achieve a positive outcome. You're not fighting the doer head on. You're cleverly designing a path where the doer's laziness actually helps the planner win in the long run.
Absolutely. And the results, as you mentioned, were stunning compared to traditional opt-in programs.
Yeah, I remember reading about those. The numbers were huge.
They were. Studies showed participation rates jumping dramatically, maybe from around 3.5% in some traditional plans up to over 13.5% in SMART programs. And the average amount people saved also went up significantly over time.
Wow.
So the fundamental actionable takeaway here is crystal clear for listeners. If you have long-term goals, never rely solely on willpower. If you really want to achieve something, save money, exercise, learn a skill, automate it, pre-commit to it. Make the undesirable choice require active effort, not the desirable one.
Make the good choice the easy choice.
It's exactly designed for the doer. Now, if we connect this to the bigger picture, what's really fascinating is how Thaler showed that our inherent human irrationality isn't just about personal stuff, like whether we save enough or eat too much chocolate cake. It actually scales up. It dictates our social interactions and can even challenge the stability of huge financial markets.
Okay, let's explore that. This brings us to lesson 4. Fairness and reciprocity. Standard economic models usually treat people as purely self-interested, like little utility-maximizing machines. The thinking is, if I can gain $1, I should take it, regardless of how it affects someone else, unless there's some penalty involved.
Right. Pure self-interest.
But Thaler demonstrated no. Humans operate with this deep-seated sense of social norms, especially around fairness. And we care about it even when sticking to those norms actually costs us money.
The classic proof of this, a real cornerstone of behavioral game theory, is the ultimatum game. It's beautifully simple. You have two participants, let's call them player A and player B. They have to split a sum of money, say $100. Player A gets to propose the split. Maybe they suggest $80 for me, $20 for you.
Okay.
Then player B has to decide, accept the offer or reject it. But here's the catch. If B rejects the offer, both players walk away with absolutely nothing, zero.
So the purely rational player B, should always accept the $20, right? Because $20 is definitely better than getting $0. Any amount over zero is technically maximizing utility.
Exactly. That's what pure economic rationality dictates. Yet in countless trials run all over the world, offers that are perceived as grossly unfair, usually anything less than about a 70-30 split favoring player A, are overwhelmingly rejected by player B.
So people would rather get nothing.
Yes. Player B would rather take the financial hit themselves, get zero, and in doing so, punish player A's perceived greed, than accept an offer that violates that fundamental social norm of fairness and reciprocity.
That's economically irrational, but it makes perfect human sense.
Precisely. It's irrational by the econ standard, but deeply rational from a social and psychological perspective.
And this has huge real-world implications, far beyond some lab game. Think about things like corporate pricing strategies or HR policies. If a company rolls out, say, a surge pricing model that's perfectly efficient on paper for maximizing profit, but customers see it as unfair price gouging, like hiking bottled water prices massively after a natural disaster.
Yeah, terrible example.
People will actively revolt. They'll find alternatives, organize boycotts, complain loudly online, even if those actions cost them a bit more time or money personally.
Fairness essentially acts like a non-monetary form of currency. Thaler showed people will literally sacrifice cold, hard cash to uphold fairness, to maintain trust, to enforce reciprocity. So the lesson for business is clear. If you optimize purely for financial efficiency but ignore the psychological cost of perceived unfairness, you are absolutely guaranteeing resistance.
That unwritten code of social conduct often trumps the explicit rulebook of just maximizing profit.
Absolutely. Perceptions matter.
In this broader sense of, well, human irrationality affecting outcomes, leads us directly to lesson 5, anomalies and the markets. Now, this is where Thaler's work really went head-to-head with the established academic giants of the time. He was directly challenging the efficient market hypothesis, the EMH.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
Back in the 1970s and 80s, the EMH was basically the unquestioned king of finance theory, championed by hugely influential figures like Eugene Fama.
Right. The EMH basically held that asset prices, stock prices, bond prices always accurately reflect all available public information. Instantly. Why? Because the theory assumes that if any asset were mispriced, say a stock was trading too cheaply, a whole swarm of perfectly rational traders would immediately spot the opportunity, buy it up, and their buying pressure would instantly drive the price back to its correct rational level.
So the EMH essentially says there are no free lunches in the market. You can't consistently beat the market through analysis because prices already reflect everything knowable.
Correct. It paints this picture of the financial world as a perfectly fine-tuned, frictionless information processing machine. Pure rationality reigns.
But Thaler, being Thaler, started noticing things that didn't fit. Consistent, systematic cracks in this perfect armor, things he started calling anomalies.
Exactly. Anomalies were these persistent deviations from rational pricing that just, well, they shouldn't exist according to the EMH, but they clearly did, and they kept happening. One really famous example he talks about is the closed-end fund anomaly. Okay, so a closed-end fund is a type of investment fund that trades on the stock exchange like a regular stock, but it holds a specific portfolio of other assets like stocks or bonds.
Got it.
Now, rationally, the market price of the closed-end fund shares should equal its net asset value, or NAV, which is simply the combined market value of all the individual assets it holds inside. Makes sense, right?
Yeah, the wrapper should be worth the same as what's inside the wrapper.
Exactly. But Thaler observed that these closed-end funds persistently, traded at a discount to their NAV, often 10%, sometimes even 20% below the actual market value of the assets they held.
So it's like buying a basket of groceries for $80 when you know for a fact that all the items inside, if bought separately, are worth $100.
Precisely. It's an obvious, persistent mispricing. According to the EMH, rational traders, arbitrageurs should jump on this instantly. They should buy the cheap fund shares and simultaneously sell the underlying assets, or a hedge, locking in a risk-free profit and closing that price gap.
But they don't always, or not completely anyway. Why not?
Because, Thaler argued, the market isn't solely populated by perfectly rational econs. It's also populated by what he called noise traders, investors who are driven by sentiment, by fear, by greed, by herd mentality, by psychological factors, not pure information.
Ah, the humans are back on the market.
They never left. Thaler argued that these discounts exist and persist because of behavioral factors like fluctuating investor sentiment and what are called limits to arbitrage. Even if rational arbitrageurs see the mispricing, they face real risks. What if investor sentiment gets even worse before it corrects? What if the discount widens further? Those risks can prevent them from betting big enough to fully close the gap.
So the market is adaptive, maybe, but it's definitely messy. It's not perfect.
Exactly. It's not the perfectly oiled machine of the EMH.
That's a really crucial insight for anyone involved in business strategy or investing, isn't it? It means we absolutely cannot rely on some theoretical market efficiency to automatically correct all errors or smooth out all bumps.
No, we have to expect overreactions to news, both good and bad. We have to expect bubbles driven by collective euphoria and crashes fueled by collective panic.
Behavioral economics sees markets less like perfect clocks and more like complex, adaptive, sometimes chaotic ecosystems, driven as much by human fear and greed as by rational calculation.
That's a great way to put it. And it implies that resilience, being prepared for deviations, is probably a much better long-term strategy than chasing some theoretical model of perfect market prediction.
Okay, so where does this leave us? We've established pretty clearly that people misbehave predictably, whether it's in a controlled lab experiment or when they're standing at an ATM deciding how much cash to take out or even trading billions on the stock exchange. If we understand this pattern of human misbehavior, the next logical step, surely, is to try and harness that knowledge, right? To actually help people make better decisions.
Absolutely. And this is really the genius and I think the ultimate practical application of Taylor's lifetime of work. It's encapsulated in Lesson 6, Nudging and Choice Architecture. This concept, which he famously explored in much more detail in his later book, Nudge, co-authored with Cass Sunstein. This is how behavioral economics really transitioned from being an interesting academic theory to becoming a tool for global policy implementation.
Right. The term nudge has definitely entered the popular vocabulary now, hasn't it? But give us the precise Thalerian definition. What exactly is a nudge? Because the specifics matter here.
They really do. Okay, so a nudge is any subtle change in the choice architecture that's the environment or context in which a decision is made that steers people toward better outcomes without restricting their options or significantly changing the economic incentives. To use Thaler and Sunstein's own words, a nudge is any aspect of choice architecture that alters people's behavior in a predictable way without forbidding options or significantly changing their economic incentives.
Okay, the crucial distinction there seems to be that a nudge is fundamentally different from, say, a mandate, you must do this, or a prohibition, you cannot do this.
Exactly.
It has to preserve freedom of choice. You can still pick the bad option if you really want to.
Yeah.
The nudge just aims to make the good option the easier, more natural, or more obvious path.
Precisely. And the power of defaults is the absolute classic illustration here, which we touched on earlier with the pension enrollment example. This is really the cornerstone of effective choice architecture. When governments in the US and the UK set up their nudge units, the behavioral insights teams, one of their earliest and most stunningly successful interventions was simply leveraging defaults.
How so?
They used it to dramatically increase things like organ donation rates, participation in retirement savings plans, even voter registration. By changing the default setting, instead of requiring people to actively opt in to the desired behavior, like saving or donating organs, They made that the default, requiring people to actively opt out if they didn't want to participate.
So they harness that powerful human tendency toward inertia, doing nothing.
Exactly. Doing nothing now leads to the good outcome. It leverages our predictable laziness, you could say.
I was thinking of the cafeteria line analogy. If you want students to eat healthier food,
Yeah.
you could just ban all the junk food. That's a mandate. Or you could put a huge tax on cookies. That's a strong incentive change.
Right.
But a nudge would be something much simpler, like just rearranging the layout. Put the salad bar right at the beginning of the line, make it brightly lit, at eye level, really appealing, make it the easiest, most prominent first choice.
And maybe move the desserts to a less convenient corner.
Exactly. Hide them a bit. The choice to eat cookies is still there, but the architecture gently guides most people towards the salad first.
That's a perfect example. You're leveraging those cognitive shortcuts, like ease and visibility, rather than trying to fight against ingrained habits with sheer willpower or force.
Makes sense.
Now, beyond just nudging and choice architecture, Thaler's research really highlighted several other key supporting concepts that help us analyze why people make the decisions they do. He systematically collected and categorized all those factors that classical economics insisted must be ignored, famously dubbing them supposedly irrelevant factors, or SIFs.
SIFs. Okay. What are some concrete examples of these SIFs that traditional theory just completely missed, but we now know are actually critical drivers of behavior?
Well, we've already talked about the endowment effect ownership being a SIF. Another huge one is the sunk cost fallacy. Rationally, a sunk cost money or effort you've already spent and cannot get back should have absolutely zero influence on your future decisions. The past is past.
Right. What's done is done.
Exactly. So if you paid $100 for a non-refundable gym membership back in January, and by March you realize you absolutely hate going to that gym, the purely rational choice is just to quit. The $100 is gone regardless.
But that's not what most people do, is it?
No. The human feels this powerful obligation to keep going, maybe through gritted teeth, because I already paid for it. We let that past, irrecoverable investment dictate our future actions. That $100 is a SIF. It's supposedly irrelevant to the future decision of whether going to the gym today provides value, but it feels profoundly influential.
I definitely feel that one. Another SIF you mentioned earlier was framing, right? How information is presented.
Yes, hugely important. The exact same factual information can lead to vastly different choices depending purely on how it's framed. Think about a medical procedure. If it's framed as having a 90% success rate, people feel far more positive and are more likely to consent than if the exact same procedure is framed as having a 10% failure rate.
Even though the underlying statistic is identical.
Identical. But the positive frame, success, feels good, while the negative frame, failure, triggers loss aversion. The human brain reacts very differently. The econ brain would process both frames as logically equivalent. Presentation is a powerful SIF.
And the overall success of this whole behavioral movement really came from Thaler's willingness to embrace this interdisciplinary approach, didn't it? He wasn't afraid to borrow from psychology.
Absolutely. He essentially bridged the gap. He took the empirical findings from psychology, all these cognitive biases and heuristics documented by Kahneman, Tversky, and others, and he gave them economic relevance, often adding mathematical rigor, showing how they played out in markets and policy contexts.
So he kind of legitimized using psychology within the fields of high finance and government policy.
He really did. He effectively declared that these deviations from the standard rational model, these anomalies, they aren't just random noise that you can ignore or hope will cancel out. No, they are clear, loud signals. Signals that indicate we need a better, more realistic, more human-centered model of decision-making.
And by focusing on those signals, those predictable instances of misbehavior, he was able to build this cohesive and incredibly useful framework. It helps explain why we collectively struggle with everything from saving enough for retirement to tackling climate change.
It provides a lens to understand the human element in economic life.
Okay, so misbehaving is ultimately, I think, an instruction manual. It's about designing better systems, better personal habits, better company policies, maybe even better government programs. So for everyone listening, let's try to distill the most practical, actionable takeaways we can pull from Thaler's whole journey described in the book. What can we actually do with this knowledge? First, I'd say, in any planning situation, whether you're managing a team project or just setting your personal budget, you absolutely must anticipate human irrationality. Don't build plans assuming perfect optimization from yourself or others.
Yeah, that's crucial. Always plan for the doer to inevitably show up and potentially sabotage the planner's best intentions. Build in buffers, build in checks.
Second takeaway. Frame choices and information effectively. Remember the power of mental accounting, loss aversion, and framing effects. How you present options dramatically influences decisions. Think about presenting costs as potential losses and savings or benefits as definite gains.
hmm Third, and maybe the most powerful practical tool, create better defaults. This is often the easiest and most impactful nudge you can implement. Make the desirable choice, saving money, enrolling in a program, following a safety procedure, the automatic default setting. Make inertia work for you, not against you.
Number 4, break large, overwhelming decisions down into smaller, more manageable chunks. Behavioral science consistently shows that high-friction complexity, effort, big commitments lead straight to procrastination and inaction. Smaller steps, more frequent commitments often feel much easier for the doer to actually swallow and follow through on.
Good one. Fifth, use mental accounting consciously, rather than just letting it happen to you. When you get a bonus or a tax refund, maybe take a moment to deliberately assign it to a rational category in your mind, like paying down high-interest debt or boosting retirement savings, before your impulsive doer brain automatically classifies it as free fun money.
Yeah, take control of the buckets. Sixth, commit your future self. Use external tools. Set up automatic savings transfers. Use payroll deductions. Maybe make public commitments or use apps that create accountability. Do whatever it takes to ensure the planner's long-term goals are actually enforced on that future, easily distracted doer.
Seventh, design processes based on perceived fairness, not just pure efficiency. This is huge in organizations.
Right.
Whether you're setting employee salaries, deciding on promotions, or creating customer service policies, if the process feels unfair or arbitrary, people will resist it, lose trust, maybe even sabotage it, even if it looks perfectly logical on a spreadsheet.
That trust element is key.
Yeah.
Okay, eighth, especially for investors and business leaders, expect market anomalies and surprises. Markets are not perfectly efficient clocks. They are messy, human-driven ecosystems. Building resilience, diversifying, and having contingency plans are often much better long-term strategies than relying solely on theoretical models predicting perfect market rationality.
Well said. Ninth, actively audit your environment for choice architecture. Look critically at the decision points in your home, your workplace, your organization's processes. Ask, how is this choice currently structured? Is the path to the desired behavior clear, simple, easy, automatic? Or is it full of friction? Can we redesign it?
And finally, maybe the most personal one, 10th, reflect constantly on your own biases. Remember, you are human too. Knowing your own personal selves, your specific tendency towards loss aversion, or getting trapped by sunk costs, or maybe your particular brand of mental accounting, allows you to be more mindful and proactively build safeguards against your own predictable mistakes. Self-awareness is the first step.
That's a great list. And if we were to try and boil down the absolute core message Thaler delivers throughout Misbehaving, I think it really comes down to this. The fundamental design principle for modern life, for policy, for business, must be design with humans, not with abstract models. Every single time you make an assumption that people will act like perfectly rational, optimizing econs. Well, that's not just a potential error in your thinking, it's introducing a serious structural risk into whatever system you're building.
Absolutely. Because what Thaler ultimately spent his entire career proving, with evidence and humor, is that misbehaving in economics, well, it's simply behaving like a human being.
Yeah.
And we need to embrace that reality. Design systems around our actual human tendencies rather than constantly fighting against them with rigid, unrealistic theories that just don't fit. And if we do that, if we design for humans, we'll all end up making smarter decisions, building better organizations, and navigating this inherently and maybe even beautifully messy world more effectively.
Thaler's work really stands as a powerful testament to the simple power of careful observation. Just by noticing what people actually do in the real world, rather than relying solely on what elegant theories dictated they should do. He ended up providing insights and tools that governments, businesses, and individuals around the globe use every single day now. It's fundamentally changed how we understand human nature, especially when it comes to decisions and their consequences.
A truly impactful legacy. And if you found these lessons from Misbehaving helpful, please do subscribe to our channel, Book by Book, for more helpful book summaries just like this one. And please share it with others who might find it useful, and give it a like that really helps us out and motivates us to keep bringing you the best book summaries we can find.